Jack. Okay, Jack talked about passion, right? And that is a really important point, because there you're talking about intangibles, right? And intangibles are the things that are difficult to pass on. You know, if you ask somebody to explain or to share information about something that's intangible, then you really have to think about it. It becomes a self-reflective exercise, which only informs and improves your own practice, but it's not an easy thing to do. A lot of discussion about mentoring. Don't let knowledge reside with one person, which is what Melissa is referring to, and have history written down. A lot of us are still in what I'd like to call the oral tradition. That's something within our own organization that we've sometimes been accused of, right? And when you are then rolling out a role model to other organizations and you have to share it, you have to move beyond the oral tradition and start writing it down and thinking about what it is you do, what it is you do successfully, what you've learned, and how you're going to share that with others. So I think one of the final, before we wrap up, is we want to get a sense from this group of what are the next steps. Because out of this discussion is now going to go back to the bigger networks, all of the knowledge and the information that you shared as a group, so that it can be implemented. It's not going to just talk about things, because when you just talk about things and you just go away, you feel like nothing's been accomplished. So it's actually I think we had a wonderful discussion today, and I have learned a lot. That there were lots of points that came up that I hadn't thought of before. I came into this discussion that are now buzzing around in my head. But it's how to take that back and actually do something with it. So we would need to sort of identify as a group what are our major points that we now want to take back to the network, and when we have the debriefing of the conference, those ideas are then going to be translated into action. So we need to identify what those
So does
are.
that mean that you're going to take all this information that you've gathered and develop a project out of that to move this forward?
That could happen, yes.
Then I don't think you should leave anything out,
Okay.
personally, because I think it's all of value for anything that we're going to move forward with in terms of a project. And take points and develop them very specifically, but I wouldn't leave anything out, personally. Because everybody in this room has a different opinion, because we all come from a different perspective of literacy. So I think that everything has value. So personally, that's my opinion.
Do you have a marker that works? Thank you.
Yeah, and we all come from a different part of the country.
Yeah.
You know, and we all have, you know,
And some are from, you're from the Office of Literacy and Research and Skills. I'm a small community-based program. Melissa's works with the network, so we all have a...
yeah, it's a completely different perspective. So I think that all the points are valuable, and so it has to be looked at it from that perspective. So this is going to go back to the OLC, right?
Yes.
And the OLC needs to be aware that this comes from various streams. And so maybe the project is research in all of those streams, what will work for each of those streams.
I think it was also very beneficial, Margaret, to have some of the Generation Next input, because yeah, well, us little birds, we have our own little mindset, and get out there, and it's really nice because they are compassionate, they are caring, and it's I really appreciate it.
We're not monsters.
Called Generation Me.
Or Generation X is the other one.
But I mean, that's kind of the point, right? Now we have started this communication that can go between the two generations, that, the ones who are getting ready to leave, the ones who are coming in. And now you can kind of see, okay, now I know where they're coming from. They're not telling me, or they're not trying to be unreasonable. They're just telling me what they're looking for. And vice versa. You can kind of go, all right, now I know where they're coming from. They like everything in a structure. They want everything from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. That's not how I work. But once you can start that dialogue, then that's when change can happen.
I think it's important too to not look at in terms of this is one generation and this is the other generation. You go sit over here, I'll go sit over here, and and then we'll just, it's a power struggle. I don't think it should be looked at as a power struggle. I mean, coming into my job, I haven't had a problem with that. People appreciate what I have to say, I appreciate what they have to say. It works both ways. I've never really encountered that. And to me, it's kind of scary because I can respect what someone older, more experienced than me has to say, and I would expect the same courtesy, So I don't think it should be looked at in terms of segregation, but in terms of still a community and moving forward. I think that could be a goal for that, is to stop seeing it as two different groups. It's one group for the same cause. Everyone has something to contribute that is of equal value, and I think that's what it, I shouldn't say should, but I think that's an idea for what it could come down to, and everybody is equal. So I don't think it's good to look at people in terms of you're over here and I'm over here because you're older and I'm younger, or you're, I think that's unhealthy.
Did anybody have an aha moment during this discussion? I know I had one, so. You thought, I never really thought of that. I think it was probably summed up in this point here, the value of having Generation Next as part of this discussion, because that was to me my aha moments, was actually hearing them talk about their needs and their dreams and their hopes and their particular challenges, that some points came up that I hadn't thought of before.
Yeah, I was quite surprised when I came in to see all the young people here, because I thought,
what are they doing here?
yes. They're not getting ready to pass the torch, but it was good, a
Yes.
good perspective.
Okay, Ashley?
Just one thing that I wanted to highlight, being from Generation Next, I guess I'm 26 as well. It's kind of scary to be identified as young, and I'll just give you an
Not as scary as
example.
being identified as old.
A couple years ago, I spoke at this conference, and I was speaking about a project that we had just wrapped up, and a woman who I swear was not a day over 35 came up to me at the end, and she said, "You should be really proud of yourself, young lady." And now every time I go into a conference to speak, I get this nervous feeling that because it's very patronizing.
Yes, ageism. Yes.
To feel like that, and it was honestly not something that I had considered people saw when they looked at me before that, and I know I have a lot to learn, and I'm very lucky to be part of the network. I have a great boss, and also there's some real heroes of literacy that we have access to. So I think it's also about making the field accessible and identifying where those people are so that they can pass the torch on, and we don't necessarily need to take it from the people that are directly above us in our organization, but there's definitely a wealth of knowledge across this province and this country that we need to make sure is accessible to young people.
Just when you mentioned heroes of literacy, I don't know any of the heroes of literacy, and I would love to have access to that, like to just hear some amazing success stories from people outside my direct center. And that's not, if it exists, I don't know where it is, and I work in the field.
You have one at your table.
So that kind of thing would be really, really cool.
Okay, write that down.
So please don't forget to fill in your evaluation forms. They are on your table. And we would both like to thank you guys very much for spending, your 75 minutes with us this time around. Great.
Thank you. Already? You were fabulous.
Thank you for putting this on.
If we could have handpicked a group, we could have done better.